The first time I ran into something I'd call a monster, I was at a routine doctor's appointment. See, 4 years back, I'd been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition. My immune system was attacking my nervous system, to the point where sometimes my legs would go completely numb, leaving me paralyzed in random bursts. Just as wonderful as it sounds, right? On my way out of the hospital, I'd always swing by to visit my friend. With me, as always, was Kato, my German shepherd and guardian angel, trained to help me with anything I couldn't do myself. But today, stepping into Agnes' room, something felt different. The air seemed cooler, and the only light came from the flickering blue glow of a TV, playing quietly. Oddly, her bed was empty. Suddenly, a faint siren sound, wee woo, echoed from the far side of the room. It was an eerie sound, like someone trying to whistle it but messing up the tune. The back half of the room was mostly dark, but I could make out a pile of crumpled sheets on another bed. Beneath that bed, a large shadow moved. Kato let out a low growl, and I said, "Hello. Is anyone there?" The strange whistling stopped abruptly. Something slid across the floor and bumped into my foot, a remote control. Then, I heard this unsettling voice, someone trying to sound like a little kid. My apologies," it said, soft and strange. I saw a hand reach out from the other side of the mattress as a figure crawled out from under the bed, moving almost like a spider. I couldn't make out his face, just the blocky silhouette of his body and the hospital gown he was wearing. I stammered, "Don't worry about it. Do you know where Agnes is?" The figure climbed up onto the mattress, pulling the blankets over himself. "I don't want you to see me like this," he murmured. "Neither does Agnes. Could you hand me the remote?" Kato growled again, his eyes fixed on the man. I asked, "Where's Agnes?" He replied, "I'll tell you if you hand me the remote." I shot back, "Why'd you throw it to me if you wanted it?" He sighed. "I'm not myself today." I was just about to turn and get out of there when his arm stretched into the light, revealing skin that looked as though it had been burned with acid. Or maybe he'd been in a fire. Kato barked, and I hushed him. I felt a pang of sadness and stepped forward, holding out the remote. The man was about to take it when he yanked my wrist, pulling me toward him. At 5 feet 1 inch and 120 pounds, it didn't take much. With a cruel little giggle, he said, "How about a kiss for a dead man?" Kato erupted in barks, nearly jumping onto the bed. In the dim light, his face didn't look right. I remember thinking my vision had to be going bad. His eyes were too deep set, his nose too big. His skin looked so badly burned, and most horrifying, he had twisted horns and spines poking out of his shoulders and arms. Tiny, sharp barbs surrounded his mouth, maybe teeth, maybe piercings. Kato was losing it, trying to get on the bed to protect me. I held him back, pulling away from the man with all my strength until finally, 2 nurses burst into the room. They forced him to let go of my arm, but he fought against them, thrashing until he had to be restrained. I held Kato close, my heart pounding in my chest. A nurse turned to me, "Miss, please, you need to leave." I said, "What's wrong with him?" She just insisted, "Please, you're upsetting him." I asked again, "Where's Agnes?" That's when she dropped the bomb, "I'm sorry, but Agnes passed away 2 days ago." That news hit me just as hard as seeing that monster of a man. Standing outside the hospital with Kato, waiting for my Uber, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. That man, and the loss of Agnes, kept swirling through my thoughts. The sun was setting, and for the first time, I noticed the full moon rising, big and bright on the horizon. Agnes was gone. And that strange man's twisted face was stuck in my mind. The week before, she and I had talked about me moving in with her, a comforting plan that now felt like a pipe dream. Agnes was like a mother to me, far more than my own ever was. When I'd first moved to the big city from a small town, friends like her were rare to find. I thought of my mom's last text, you know you're always welcome back home. Don't waste your good years out there. She never thought I could make it. But I had bigger dreams. Soon, the Uber pulled up and took us to work. I worked the cashier desk for valet parking at a bustling Hollywood hotel. Ironic, right? Watching folks sprint around when some days, I could hardly walk. Kato curled up under the desk, and I did my job. I actually liked it. I met all kinds of people, most of them pleasant, but in Hollywood, there's always a few real pieces of work. I remember that night, a few fights broke out right there on the valet driveway. Brawls weren't exactly uncommon, usually just some guys letting their egos get the best of them. But having more than one in a night? That was rare. Then again, it was a Friday, and Fridays always got a bit wild. We had this saying, Fridays were for the amateurs, Saturdays were for the pros. After my shift, I started my usual walk toward the subway, passing by a homeless camp on the way. Out of nowhere, a man toppled out of a tent, and before I knew it, another guy was on top of him, pounding his face with a shoe. Someone else jumped in to pull them apart, and I quickly crossed the street, telling myself that Hollywood was just plain crazy. I hadn't made it much further when I felt that familiar tingling in my legs. It always hit out of nowhere, just like that. Kato, sensing it, went stiff, and I could feel my legs starting to give out as the paralysis took over. I did my best to ease myself onto the sidewalk before my legs went entirely numb. My anxiety shot up immediately. I focused on taking deep breaths, but the same fear gripped me every time. What if this was it? What if I'd never get the strength to stand again? My nerves totally shot. Kato, my loyal shadow, sat beside me. I loved that dog. But just then, his whimper turned into a low, menacing growl. Not far off, I noticed a guy huddled up by a boarded-up storefront, surrounded by layers of clothing, 2 backpacks, and what looked like a fancy purse. He took a long drag of something, glancing at me with hollow, almost decayed eyes. His skin was pale, and his beard looked slimy, like it was made of seaweed that squirmed and moved on its own. Dressed in a dark hoodie, he looked like some sort of cracked-out Grim Reaper. He sneered as if he could smell my discomfort. He stood up, muttering, "I got you." Kato barked, and I tried to stay calm. "No thanks, I'm good." But he just stepped closer. "Wanna party? Got something for your dog, too." That was it for me. I wasn't sticking around. "Kato, carry," I commanded, and Kato crouched as I pulled myself over his back. He carried me away while the guy laughed like a hyena. I would have loved to kick him in the face. It wasn't the first time Kato had carried me like that, but I'm sure we looked ridiculous. By the time we got to the subway platform, I'd managed to regain some strength and could stand again. Lately, these episodes had been hitting me more often. My doctor figured I was just going through a rough patch. As I waited, I noticed a few people in the shadows, their faces barely visible as smoke drifted out from where they sat. For a split second, I caught a glimpse of a woman's face. It looked like she had the pointed nose and long ears of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead. At that moment, I started questioning what I was seeing. It had been a long day, and I was beyond exhausted. I should probably mention that I had a bit of an obsession with death. It was hard not to think about it when your own body constantly reminded you that it was wearing down faster than most people's. Eventually, we got back to my neighborhood in Koreatown. Unfortunately, I lived on the rougher side. When I'd first moved to LA, I didn't know any better. K-Town seemed ideal since it was cheap, close to the subway, and near a big park for Kato. Normally, the area was full of life, but tonight, it was dead quiet, almost like a sleepy little town. You'd never guess that the place was crawling with gangs, something like 10 in the area, including 2 of the biggest ones around. Even the abandoned apartment building next door was silent. That place had been taken over by one of the gangs and turned into a party spot, what they called a bando. The place gave me the creeps, though thankfully, I didn't have to walk past it too often. Kato and I took the elevator up to the 5th floor of my building. I rented a room from Jen, an exotic dancer who was rarely home at night. Most of the time, I had the place to myself, though when Jen did come back, she was usually a bit of a mess. I was planning to let her know I'd be moving out soon since Agnes was supposed to be out of the hospital next month. I trusted Jen well enough, but her party friends were another story, so I always hid my wallet. Since we were on the top floor, we had access to the attic through a hatch in my closet. That's where I kept my safe spot. To reach it, I had to drag a chest over, set up a step stool, climb onto a shelf, slide open the hatch, and stash my wallet up there. By the time I'd finished, I was exhausted and ready to crash. Kato lay down nearby. I was jolted awake by the sound of sirens in the distance. From outside, I heard shouting, screaming, and gunshots, a lot of gunshots. Kato started to whine, his eyes fixed on my closed bedroom door. Then I heard it, thud, thud, thud. Footsteps just outside. I held my breath, hoping it was just Jen. Jen. Is that you? No response. Kato started to growl. I tried again, Jen. But the only answer was the sound of footsteps, moving back and forth just outside the door. My muscles tensed as I eyed the window. The sirens and gunfire continued outside. Then the door handle jiggled, just barely, and Kato barked, loud and fierce. Enough screwing around, I muttered. Luckily, I always kept the door locked. Then I heard it, a soft scratching sound, like nails dragging down the wood. I've got a gun and a killer dog in here. I shouted, hoping whoever it was would take the hint. I didn't actually have a gun, but I wished I did. Suddenly, something slammed into the door, hard. And then again. And again. It was trying to break in. Kato jumped to his feet, barking like a maniac, my own little war angel. Then, just as quickly, the pounding stopped. I heard whispering, a mix of voices, and then giggling, coming from right outside the door. My heart pounded as I jammed my desk chair under the doorknob, hoping it would hold the door shut. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, only to hear a recorded message saying they were swamped with calls and I'd have to hold. I started screaming at the top of my lungs. Help! Somebody help me! Kato barked like mad, adding to the noise. Surely, one of the neighbors would hear us. I slipped on my shoes, my hands shaking as the laughter grew louder outside. It was clear there was more than one of them. A girl's voice called out, "Relax, we're just messing around, we're looking for Jen. We want a party." "Where is she?" I shouted back, "How did you get in?" She answered, "We're friends." "Where is she?" I tried to stay calm. "I don't know, but she's not here. So please, just leave." Then a guy chimed in, "Do you know where she keeps her stuff?" The girl snapped, "Shut up." I knew Jen dealt a bit on the side. I quickly tried calling her, but only got her voicemail. I sent a quick text, "Emergency, call me." From outside, the girl called, "You got anything?" I did have some painkillers, but I wasn't about to tell them that. "Nope, I don't use that stuff," I replied. Then suddenly, she started screaming. I heard sounds like animals fighting, growling, snarling, furniture smashing. Kato yelped. Using the chaos, I opened the fire escape window, but I knew we couldn't go that way. There was a ladder at the bottom, and Kato would never make it down. I quickly pushed the chest to the closet, put the step stool on top, and scrambled to call 911 again, but got the same voicemail message. Just then, the sounds outside stopped, followed by a hard bang against the door. And then another. "Tell us where her stuff is." The door frame splintered as Kato snarled beside me. I lifted him up onto the chest and stool, then he jumped onto the top shelf. He looked back, whimpering, and I stretched up with a selfie stick to push the attic door open. They slammed the door again, and the frame cracked more. I grabbed my pain pills and tossed them onto the dresser as a distraction, then climbed onto the chest. Go! I urged Kato, and he leapt into the attic. I climbed up behind him, using the selfie stick to knock the stool down and hide our path. But as I tried to get up into the attic, I got stuck, unable to bend enough to pull myself through. Kato whined as I struggled. The door burst open, and they shoved the chair aside. I gave Kato a desperate look, and he tugged me up just as they barged into the room. I pulled the attic door closed, leaving it open just a crack, hoping they wouldn't notice. The closet was dark and deep, which might keep us hidden. They started tearing through my room, searching. The biggest one stood in the doorway, watching. Another came over to the closet, peeking inside. "Hey, come on out and play. We don't bite." His yellow eyes missed the attic door as he backed out. One of them searched under the bed, checked the bathroom, and then went to the open fire escape window. Where the hell did she go? She had to have gone this way. They turned on a light, rifling through drawers. "Oh, man, look at this," one of them said, and I saw them passing my pills around. One of them stared at his own reflection in the mirror, touching his face. He looked shaky. "I need more of these, man. I need to just forget," another voice chimed in. "What do you think's gonna happen to us?" "We're gonna die, bro," someone muttered. "Shut the hell up," growled the biggest guy in a voice that sounded anything but human. In the light, I could finally see them clearly. They wore gangster clothes, baggy t-shirts, khakis, and heavy chains, but each looked more twisted than the last. One guy had a huge, square jaw and a shaved head, his body covered in tattoos. His skin looked like it was ripping, bones nearly poking through in places with fresh blood oozing from the wounds. Another guy's skin had a scaly, reptilian look. He had long hair, one enormous eye in the center of his forehead like a cyclops, and a disturbingly wide mouth. His neck twisted and moved like a snake. The girl was the most disturbing. Her face looked like the skin had been peeled away, leaving it raw. Her thin arms looked as though they were covered in thorny spikes. But the last one was the worst. He was a hulking giant with ram horns curving from his skull. His face was almost like a gorilla's, with frothy, bloody spit dripping from his eyes and mouth. One of them glanced right at me, his eyes zeroing in on the attic door in the closet's darkness. I froze. "Check it out," he said. I held my breath as all four of them looked up. One climbed onto the chest. I scurried back as far as I could, Kato growling beside me. I gently shushed him, and we moved toward a small vent in the corner. I could hear them setting up the stool on the chest. The attic door slid open with a grating screech. A dark head poked up into the attic, but I doubted it could see us in the shadows. Kato, though, had had enough and was about to lunge. I held him back before he could go for it. The creature flinched, losing its balance, and tumbled back. I could hear laughter as he fell. Grabbing Kato, I hauled him toward the vent. Then, bam! 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 They fired shots into the attic. I yelled out, "Stop! Please stop! I'll come down. I'll show you where Jen's stash is. Just don't hurt my dog." But there was no chance I was going down there. Instead, I tried loosening the screws on the vent to escape. I could see the fire escape just beyond it, but the screws wouldn't budge. They stopped firing, listening. I shouted, "I'm coming down. Just don't hurt my dog. Leave the dog up there." "You come down," one of them growled. All right, I'm coming," I called back. Moving fast, I slipped off Kato's collar and used the name tag to twist one of the screws free. The girl snapped, "What are you doing? Hurry up. I'm coming. I'm coming." I lied, loosening 3 screws. But the last one was stuck. The girl's voice cut through, "You got 3 seconds, 1, 2, I yanked the vent off, slicing my arm in the process. I shoved Kato through the opening. He barely fit. 3. Kato and I scrambled onto the fire escape. I glanced down. There was no way we could get all the way down safely. We'd have to cross by my window to the far end, where the top of the ladder met the roof's edge. That was our only chance. We climbed over a short wall and began moving across the rooftop. I remembered exploring the back side of the building once and spotting another fire escape there. There was also an interior stairwell leading to the roof, though the door was usually locked. But then I felt my legs give out. The adrenaline had scrambled my system, and I collapsed, unable to stand. I beat my legs, whispering, "No, no, no." Kato stopped, nudging me with his head. I tried to get up and climb onto him, but my energy was spent, drained by the attic escape. I heard those creatures climbing up onto the roof. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Kato growled beside me. I thought, I can't lose him. I gritted my teeth and pulled myself up, chanting, "Not now, not now." I grabbed Kato's collar, pointed where I needed him to go, and he started to pull me. But I couldn't hold on, and I dropped back down. I turned to see them right behind us. "Where you think you're going, bitch?" One raised a gun toward Kato. I grabbed his collar and yelled, "Go!" Bam! Bam! I twisted myself in front of him, feeling a hot, searing pain in my back. They kept firing as Kato bolted, dragging me along. I held on for dear life. Kato picked up speed and raced behind a huge air conditioning unit. I heard bullets tearing into the metal. When we reached the edge, Kato stopped abruptly. I peered over and saw the fire escape landing below with an attic vent just like the one on our side of the building. But it was a 5-foot drop to the landing. Getting Kato down was going to be much harder than getting him up. He whimpered, and I knew we didn't have much time. I slipped, feeling blood dripping from the wound in my side. I was shot in the back, and it was spreading fast. I turned back to see them closing in. I gripped Kato's collar. "Trust me." He obeyed. I swung him over the ledge, and he dropped to the landing, stumbling a bit, but he made it. Now it was my turn. My energy was spent. I could barely think straight. Gunshots echoed, along with distant sirens and screams. Flames lit up nearby rooftops. What is happening to this world? I thought. The monsters were almost on top of me. Why are you running? We just want to be friends. I slung my legs over the edge and swung toward Kato. I misjudged, flying through the air, overshooting the fire escape, with nothing below but a 60-foot drop to the street. But Kato jumped and nudged me back. I slammed into the railing, barely catching the fire ladder beside him. Pain exploded through my ribs. I had to have broken at least 2. Gasping, I pulled myself up, and we stumbled down the steps. I pounded on the first window I reached, screaming, "Help me, please." But the apartment was dark, no response. I moved to the next window on the fire escape. I banged harder, yelling until I saw the outline of a woman inside. She didn't move closer. I paused, hoping she wasn't like the monsters chasing us. "Please. Help us. They're trying to kill us." She shot back, "Get out of here. Please." 4 of them broke into my place. I live across the building. They're after us. I pointed up toward the ledge, where the monsters were peering down at me. Another person, a man, appeared beside the woman. "Leave us alone," she yelled, shutting me out. I watched as those creatures leapt from the ledge onto the fire escape, landing just 1 floor above me. I turned toward the man and woman, dropping to my knees, pleading, "Please, help us. I'm begging you, we won't harm you. They're going to kill my dog." The couple exchanged a look, then the man stepped forward and cracked the window open. The monsters scrambled down the fire escape stairs. With a quick motion, the man revealed a shotgun, gesturing us inside with a thick Spanish accent, in. Just then, 3 of the monsters jumped down, 2 balanced on the railings, 1 standing firm on the landing. Each of them held handguns, while the biggest one stayed behind on the rooftop. One snarled, "Hey man, stay out of this, it's none of your business." The man didn't wait, he fired. The boom from the shotgun echoed through the air, and Kato yelped, his ears flattening. The blast sent 2 of the monsters scurrying off, one scrambling up and the other fleeing downward. But the shot hit its mark, knocking one of them flat onto the floor. The others abandoned him without a glance back. The big one on the roof locked eyes with the man below. Just then, the woman lifted an AR-15 and aimed right at him. Beside her, a teenage girl held her own AR-15, aimed steady as a stone. The fallen monster rolled in agony, and I cringed, taking in the sight. It was the same one I'd caught looking into my mirror earlier, but up close, he was a horror show. His eyes were sunken deep, and his skin seemed to be melting off his skull, revealing his white bone beneath. Spikes, wet and red, jutted from his whole body, but his eyes were still full of life, wild and desperate. The man stared back at him, as horrified as I was. The creature's voice bubbled up in a thick, wet gurgle, "Help, please, help me. I don't know what's happening," but then, suddenly, it lunged. Boom! One clean shot from the man put an end to it. Up above, the big monster watched from the rooftop, his gaze fixed on us. The women didn't flinch, aiming steady as statues. Finally, the monster turned and ran. Just then, I felt a grip on my arm, a teenage boy pulling me inside. The others quickly followed, and the man shut the window tight behind us. They all stood back, watching us carefully. The apartment was dimly lit with candles scattered everywhere. The family appeared to be of Cuban descent, their light brown skin contrasting against their dark, curly black hair. They were all stocky and looked imposing, even in their pajamas, wielding their weapons with confidence. I burst out with relief, thank you so much. I live in 5A. They broke in, and, the woman cut me off, do you even know what's happening? I shook my head. She continued, it's everywhere, all over the city. No one's helping, and no one knows why it's happening. She exchanged a few sharp words in Spanish with the man, who spoke only in Spanish himself. Then, she gestured for me to follow her to the bathroom. Turns out, she was a nurse. The bullet had gone clean through my side without hitting anything vital, and as she bandaged me up, she remarked on how lucky I was. Meanwhile, Kato had been given a bowl of water, and I sank onto their sofa, checking my phone. The room was filled with teddy bears, probably close to 100 scattered all around. I had no new messages, so I started scrolling through YT videos, TikToks, and IG posts. One person in a video said, everything's going crazy. People are turning on each other all over the place. Someone else, it's like folks are turning into monsters or something. If you see one, just run. Then a guy with thick glasses and a nervous look claimed it was the moon's fault, the moon's way closer than it's ever been. People don't realize a huge solar flare nudged it closer, and everyone knows the moon messes with our emotions. There were theories all over the place, I swear, it's only happening to bad people. Like they're transforming into whatever they really are on the inside. Another person added, I'm telling you, if you hurt someone, you become a monster. Their friend nodded along, facts. That's exactly what happened to my brother. I kept watching the videos, but the noise outside grew more intense. It was like the world was unraveling, right outside that window. Gunshots cracked off in every direction, sounding like a twisted fireworks display, one after another. People were yelling, tires screeching, glass shattering, it was chaos, a war zone. I rushed over to the window, and there, right on the street, hundreds of gang members were going at it. It was a full-on gang war, and the kids were at the window too, watching it unfold. Out of nowhere, the woman screamed. We all darted to the kitchen, where the man sat slumped over at the table. His skin had gone dry and cracked, his face pale as a ghost. His eyes looked hollow, his gums blackened. It was like he was changing, his body twisting into something unnatural. The woman's voice broke, "No, no, this can't be happening." The kids hugged him tightly, but he gently pushed them away, muttering something like, "Peligro." Right then, there was a loud, violent pounding at the front door. That sickly, inhuman voice growled, "Open up. You killed my brother. You're dead, you hear me? Dead." We all froze, eyes locked on the door. The man suddenly collapsed, his body shaking uncontrollably. Kato started barking. The woman and the kids gripped their guns, and she glanced from me to the shotgun lying beside the man. I knew she wanted me to take it, but every part of me resisted. My eyes drifted toward the window and the fire escape outside, but footsteps echoed from both above and below. The sounds were closing in from all sides. We were trapped, pinned between the front door and the fire escape. I finally picked up the shotgun, but then, a realization hit me. I remembered what people were saying in the videos and thought about how the man started changing after he shot that creature. I put the shotgun down and said, I think if you attack them, you turn into one of them." The woman seemed to take that in, but it was too late. The man's transformation was nearly complete. His brow bulged, his nose had practically melted off his face, and tusks were forcing their way out of his mouth. He looked at her with sad, weary eyes, "Lo siento, mi amor." Tears brimmed in her eyes. It felt like time stopped as gunshots rang out against the front door. Then, in a thunderous crash, the door burst open, and a wave of monsters flooded in. The man grabbed his shotgun and opened fire. The woman shouted, "We fight with him." She and the kids fired off round after round at the monsters. The window to the fire escape shattered behind me, and more of those creatures crawled in, only to be met with a hail of bullets from the daughter and son. I dropped down and yelled to Kato, "Crawl." We moved together, crab-walking under the dining table, low to the floor. The family held their ground, using the kitchen island and bar as cover. It was a brutal standoff, gunfire ripping across the room. Shots blasted right above us, tearing into furniture and sending stuffing from shredded teddy bears swirling through the air like snow. And then I heard a guttural growl that made my blood run cold. A hulking beast of a dog, a massive Rottweiler pumped full of muscle, spiked fur jutting from its back, and fangs that looked like they could snap bone, slinked into the room, instantly spotting us. Kato made a sound I'd never heard from him before. I whispered, "Hurry." We scrambled out, sidestepping gunfire, and somehow managed to dodge into a hallway. I spotted the first door, with the demon dog practically on our heels. We dove through, slamming it shut just in time to hear the dog's teeth snap at the air. I twisted the lock as it threw itself against the door, snarling and clawing like a creature possessed. We were in a windowless bathroom, trapped. Kato whimpered, and I wrapped my arms around him. I knew he wanted to protect me but felt helpless here. I murmured, "It's going to be okay, buddy," even though I wasn't sure I believed it. The demon dog outside kept up its vicious attack on the door, the wood rattling under its weight. The gunfire from the living room was still going strong, but I knew the family wouldn't last forever. I had to think of something. Then an idea came to me. I got Kato to hop up onto the sink, then squeezed up beside him, pressing us both against the wall. I kneeled up on the sink and hung a towel over a nail where a picture used to be. I held the other end to shield us, creating a makeshift curtain. To a dog, it would look like we'd vanished. I'd done this trick with Kato a few times before. The door was starting to splinter under the force of the demon dog's claws. With my heart hammering, I reached over, unlocked it, and took a deep breath before twisting the handle. The door flew open, and the beast lunged forward into the room. Just as it charged in, I pushed Kato out, and I dove after him. The devil dog didn't even see us slip past. I hit the floor hard but managed to grab the door handle as I fell, slamming it shut behind us. "Carry me to my room," I whispered, and Kato dragged me down the hall toward the back. I remembered if this apartment was laid out like mine, there'd be another way to reach the fire escape. The sounds of the family fighting for their lives hit me hard, gunshots and screams echoed down the hallway. The woman was crying, her voice raw with terror and grief. We got to the other room and, sure enough, found the fire escape right outside the window. An AR-15 let loose in the living room, drowning out everything else, followed by a piercing scream that chilled me to the bone. Then, silence. I took a shaky breath and whispered, "Go." We scrambled out onto the fire escape. There were a few bodies sprawled on the stairs, but the area was clear for now. We hurried down 2 flights, ducking past smoke and gunfire as the street battle raged on. Monsters and gangsters clashed below, even spilling into the alley. I didn't know where we'd go, but then I heard a terrifying growl. The demon dog was back, tearing down the fire escape right behind us. I spotted a cluster of pine trees with skinny branches below. They weren't exactly sturdy, but they were our best shot. Kato was ahead of me, so I shouted, "Jump. Now." I trusted him, and he trusted me. It was reckless, maybe even deadly, but there was no other way. Kato leapt over the railing, and I followed, using my momentum to flip myself over and hurtling down through the air. We hit the trees about a story up, crashing through thin, bouncy limbs that slowed our fall just enough. The branches scratched at us, but we bounced off them and missed the wall, finally hitting the ground in a daze. I looked up to see the demon dog barking from the fire escape, but it didn't follow. Even to that beast, our escape looked insane. Kato limped over and licked my face. Relief washed over me, he was okay. I, on the other hand, was pretty beat up. I realized we'd landed right next to that creepy, abandoned house I'd noticed earlier. It was the only place left to hide. We crawled toward it, slipping into the shadows. From our spot, I watched the fire escape. The huge creature with ram-like horns stepped out, glaring down into the yard as the demon dog barked in our direction. The monster's eyes scanned the ground, searching. Finally, he shouted, "I'm gonna find you, you hear me? You can't hide." He then ducked back inside, with the hellhound following him. The noise in the alley told me we didn't have much choice, we'd have to hide inside the abandoned house. We slipped in through the back door, making our way down a crumbling hallway. Every step felt like agony. I was battered and bruised, barely able to keep moving. We stumbled into a room with a short flight of steps that led down into an old laundry room. I closed the door, propping a chair beneath the handle to lock it. But I needed more than that. With the last of my strength, I heaved a heavy dryer over to block the door, wedging it behind the chair. Kato nudged me, helping as best he could. We shoved the washer behind the dryer, and I dragged a small table up against the washer, creating a solid barrier. It wasn't much, but it was something. Finally, I sank down into an old rocking chair. The slow, steady motion felt strangely comforting, bringing back memories of childhood. I guided Kato up onto my lap, and we rocked together, back and forth. For the first time that night, we felt a moment of calm. But guilt gnawed at me. The family, they hadn't survived, and it was my fault. I'd brought this horror to their door. So we sat there, rocking gently in that dark, musty room, hoping, praying, that the monsters wouldn't find us.